Hello there, this is my second vlog video. I'm Betamax80 and this evening I'm going to talk about two subjects, partly about using older computer hardware and casual computer gaming and the fact that it has value and the interest in using older computer hardware, or you could almost say being a vintage or retro hardware enthusiast. And the second thing I want to talk about is the neurodiverse aspect of my life. Okay, so first thing, using older computer hardware and the enjoyment it brings. Well, it's easy to spend £2,000 to £2,500 on a brand new computer that can play games that have been released in 2016. I almost don't feel like there's a challenge in that. The challenge is actually having the money in the first place to be able to afford that kind of computer hardware. It's all very impressive, it's very high tech, and it involves the cutting edge of technology, which is fantastic for the manufacturers and of very little interest to anyone else really, apart from the fact that they're getting really exciting games. That's fine and all, they're welcome to that, but I enjoy a bit more of a challenge. I work with a study skills coordinator, let's say, a study skills company who help me with my studying, and they have a very interesting name for what I do. They call me a content curator. That being somebody who gathers together information, tries to sift through the invalid information and the valid information, and then tries to actually act on the valid information, make it work, make sure that it's not all hearsay, and then publish it for a community to actually enjoy. When it comes to this computer, I'm going to show you the computer actually, so you know what I'm talking about. This is a not very exciting looking box, but it is small. Here's my monitor. It's a 22-inch monitor, and that's the computer. So you can see it's very small. Same at the sides. Small box. But it poses some useful aspects and it poses some challenges. The useful aspects are that it's very small. It has a very low power draw because the power supply is only 150 watts, and it's also got thermally sensitive components. That means, for example, that the main system fan can change its speed depending on how hot or cool the system is, which also changes the amount of noise output the computer produces. Something that more desktop computers really should have, because as you can see, this is right next to my tower, like most desktop computers, most desktop towers, but they don't normally have a thermally controlled fan, so they just blow out a lot of air and a lot of noise all the time, however cool they're running. It is actually possible to make a processor too cold, by the way, as well as too hot. Any enthusiast will tell you that, and believe it or not, it actually can affect the component speeds to some extent and the kind of performance you get out of the computer, just like an overheating computer can do. Anyway, I'm rambling on a bit here. The challenges of this computer are that, as I think I said before, it's based on a standard called Micro ITX. The Micro ITX is an interesting little system, and it was developed a while ago now. You can actually get gaming computers based on this standard, but they pose a lot of problems because the circuit boards, the motherboard as we call it, because it's the board that actually fits everything else onto it, so it's kind of a base circuit board, and everything that's got the brains for the computer goes onto it. These are very small, so they're very fiddly to work with, and they also tend to be very pernickety about the kind of components that you can use in them. When it comes to a case like this as well, you also have the problem of how much room you have to physically put things in, because if you consider a computer power supply, they're a box about so big in the first place. So let's say 2/3 of the internals of this computer is actually power, no, sorry, 1/3 of the internals of this computer is actually power supply. That means everything else has to fit basically around or underneath it. I have done some collaboration, curation, there we are, of other people's experiences of turning this server product into a desktop computer, brought them together and gone for the best experience that I could get hold of, basically using these specialized smaller components. So it's a challenge. I feel like I've got the most possible performance out of this system that has limited expansion potential. I think that's a lot more challenging and a lot more worthwhile, let's say, especially when you consider the base price of what I was working with. This computer was £120 or something like that, and that was 3 years ago. And making it into something that actually works well as a desktop computer, it's a very satisfying experience. So that's really why I enjoy the retro hardware. I have also played about with 1980s home consoles. They're a great experience as well, and I love seeing what the enthusiast community has come up with in terms of making them compatible with newer computer technology. So there are systems for these Commodore 64 Sinclair Spectrums where you actually get a little memory card, even a memory stick, from your computer full of emulator game files, put them in the original game system, and off you would go. You can actually run hundreds, thousands of games off the one card rather than having to load a tape or a cartridge. I think that's very exciting, but obviously that appeals to a very limited community, which I understand. Another aspect of wanting to use this computer, as I said, was Windows XP. The reason I was determined to use Windows XP was mainly this mouse that I've shown you before. I'll try and show you with the webcam now. There it is. It looks like a very ordinary mouse, I know, but I don't know if you can see inside it, because that tells you what you need to know. No, not really. But anyway, inside there, as I said in my first video, there's a motor, and it's all controlled by software. But the great thing about this mouse is that in Windows XP you can actually get force feedback from the mouse in Windows as well. So when you go to the start menu, when you go to a folder, when you click on an icon, you actually get force feedback sensations from the mouse. I had a curiosity about this because I think it would have a lot of use for people who had, for example, limited vision or limited hearing, which is let's say part of society that I have a lot of interest in assisting. I really don't know why this mouse didn't catch on, or why there isn't some kind of niche market for it, to be honest with you. I got this year in April because of my technical past, because of my tech industry past. I knew about this mouse when I was 20 years old, and that's actually when this was produced. This was only produced from about the year 2000 to 2002, so it's a prehistoric piece of hardware, really. But it's absolutely unique as well. There was about 3 different models, 3 different manufacturers making these mice at that period of time, but this was the only optical mouse, so it's the only version, let's say, that's based on modern standards, if you like. The other limitation with this is that the software that controls it is made by a company called Immersion, who actually make all of the force feedback technology, full stop, that's in gaming. I showed you the Xbox 360 controller, all the technology that's in a PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, that's in a Xbox One, that's in game controllers generally, actually comes from this. And in fact, the vibration functions on mobile phones comes from one company, a company called Immersion, and their software for this mouse was absolutely proprietary. There was what's called a software development kit, but that's basically little hooks that allow you to get to the edges of their proprietary software. The problem with that software is it only was updated just about to work with Windows XP. Then we've got the Logitech software. The Logitech for this software is the old version, let's say, of what's now Setpoint. It used to be called Mouseware. You can only use Mouseware with this mouse, and that was last updated in 2004, so that's very much a Windows XP product as well. And then everything started to die out for this kind of mouse, as I say. So I would really love to have the ability and understanding and access to information to actually make some kind of updated driver support for these mouse. It would absolutely fascinate me to be able to program, for example, a 64-bit driver for them, or to create a kind of software that works properly and natively in newer operating systems. Windows 7, even that would be a step forward. I'm using Windows 7 to record these videos, and the mouse is only able to use the Windows native driver, so isn't smart in any way. It's just a real mouse for Windows 7. There are hacks that allow it to work in games in Windows 7, but to me that's really only half of the experience. I think that working in Windows is very valuable. There was a community project producing some software. It's a bit half-baked, and you still have pop-ups saying that you don't have compatible software on your system even when this software is running in the background, so it's not a very satisfactory experience really. I would love to have access to the source code for the Logitech driver and for the proprietary immersion software for this mouse, and to actually make a really tight integrated system or driver package for more modern operating systems. I just don't have the technology or understanding myself to do so, but it's something that I'd be fascinated by. As far as I get in terms of that would be playing about with inf files, playing about with registry keys. That's about as far as I can go at the moment. I make nice little batch files that try to overcome problems like getting installers to run in silent mode, but this is really script kiddie level stuff. This isn't really the kind of thing that a programmer would do. This is very much hacking about at the edges of understanding. So that's my interest, I suppose. That's why I love the more vintage computers. I love curating information, and I love getting the very most out of technology that I already have, or technology that is actually accessibly priced. As I say, I'm a student myself. I don't have the money for a £2,500 computer rig. I have what I have. I already had this lying around, and it happens to be compatible with Windows XP. It uses old technology, but I love pushing old technology to its limits to see what it's capable of, which I did here. It also works out to be very cost effective. Okay, second subject. So as I mentioned at the start of the video, I am what I believe is classified by those of us that prefer the term as neurodiverse. There are a lot of conditions, I think is the best way to explain it, or neurological difficulties, I suppose is what they would have been called in the past. They've been called awful things in the past, but neurodiverse is something I really find catchy, and I'm fine with that. Long story really, but in a previous incarnation of study I was diagnosed as having what's currently termed as dyspraxia. I feel that one day maybe this won't be a term, maybe being neurodiverse will be the term, or maybe it will be something that doesn't have to be given a name, because perhaps society will actually adjust to allow for people who think and work in different ways. That would be fantastic. I'd be pleased if that was the case. However, I have dyspraxia. As I mentioned on yesterday's video, sometimes I do find it difficult to function normally and function within the constraints of a normal working day and a normal working life. And it's not laziness really, it's physically very challenging sometimes. And I know that Eli and actually Lewis now have the term special little snowflake for people that feel that they're a little bit precious. Now, I don't for 1 minute expect special treatment, but what I expect is to be understood as somebody who has interest, who has determination, who has some ingenuity, and has intelligence and ability to speak reasonably well. I hope you would agree. And actually to be able to make the most of those assets rather than having to try to fit in with normal life, I suppose, and actually wind up tired and unable to function at my best. I would love to see a situation with universities, especially in the future, where instead of having to have what I believe is called a learning plan. I can't remember what my name was. An inclusion plan. There we are, an inclusion plan. And special arrangements. It would be great to see at the front of the lecture hall a collection of equipment which can be loaned out for the duration of the lecture. Digital pens and paper, coloured overlays, that kind of thing. That would be great. Just to be given back at the end of the lecture. So anybody that needs this equipment can just go and collect it and give it back at the end, rather than it being a specific thing and you having to get it bought for you and all of this. Long story, I'm not in the sort of political space at the moment to actually start making commentary on this, but I think that's the direction that the various funding bodies want universities to move in a way already, but I think that universities perhaps need guidance or need to interpret this step as a positive move forward rather than it being the removal of funding, because it could be seen in two ways, I suppose. Anyway, as things stand, as I said earlier, sometimes I struggle with daily life. There are days, today was an example actually, where I do a certain amount of activity and I just have to go and lie down again for half an hour because I am absolutely exhausted. Some days are better than other. Some days like today feel like a wasted day, but I have to roll with it to some extent because then I'm able to think sufficiently well to provide videos like this, or I'm able to get ideas on paper, or I'm able to get on with things that need to be achieved within the working week, within working hours, within somebody else's time scale, back to what I said earlier. Neurodiversity, as I say, I don't think it should be seen as a challenge necessarily. It's a difference. It's a difference. Learning difference is something that is said these days. In addition to this, I am not going to go into too much detail, but let's just say that there is a huge mesh of neurodiversity, various neurodiverse conditions that kind of interlink with each other in certain aspects, and I feel that I may be in the part of the mesh where something is actually perhaps crossing over to the other side. So the dyspraxia accounts for some of my challenges, differences, but I think that there's some more, let's say. So I'm currently waiting for referral and an appointment confirmation for an assessment regarding that, and I guess I'm in an interesting point of life. It would be good to know one way or the other whether my suspicions are correct, and my suspicions are based on a little bit of background understanding of the subject. It's not just a hunch or a thought or a cry for help of some description. It's actually based on a bit of background, and it would be interesting to see if my thoughts are correct regarding this. We'll see. I'll update you all in a few weeks' time. If you have had a look at Eli's Failed Normal channel, you might get some kind of idea as to what I'm talking about, but I think that's why I also enjoy listening to Eli on Failed Normal, because I feel a lot of similarities in thinking with him. Sorry it's been a little bit vague in some ways and gone on a little bit perhaps, but this is me kind of getting my thoughts out on screen. As with the last video, we're nearly hitting 20 minutes, so I would like you to like or dislike, and especially if you dislike, to make a comment on how I can make these videos better. Please bear in mind that I am currently producing these on a low budget with a webcam, using the webcam's own software. If the interest grows, I'm nearly hitting 50 users at the time of speaking for the current video. If the interest grows, I may look at investing in some recording hardware such as a blue thingamy microphone, etc. But please let me know what you think of this, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.